Hey, there we are. How are you,
Awesome.
Darja?
This works. This is awesome. Thank you
Yeah,
so much
this
for
is
joining us
great.
today.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Super gladly. So for everyone out there, hi everyone. If you haven't been to this before, this is our, oh my gosh, seventh Real Talk or eighth. So what we do here, and my name is Darja, and this is obviously a Bunch Real Talk, is interviewing inspiring leaders about their real life learnings from their leadership experiences. And today we have Karl Alomar with us, who's a venture partner at and a managing partner at the VC firm M13. So welcome again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And it's very special today for you all out there because Karl is also an investor in Bunch.
I
So
am.
specifically honored to have you here today. And I think even more special, it gets even more special. Karl and I met, I think, 2.5 years ago, and we actually started to work together as a supplier and a customer. So we
Yes, true. I was a DigitalOcean and very intrigued and excited about ultimately what you guys are trying to do, and love the theories behind it. Obviously, you and I got along great. Huge belief in the team you're putting together. So I was excited to play with the platform at DigitalOcean and really test it out and see how it worked with our kind of assessing our culture in terms of our organization. And then ultimately, thanks for letting us invest and be a partner with you guys on this. So excited to see what you're building and just super excited for the evolution of the product as a whole.
Thank you so much once again for the trust back then and the interest and the support, obviously, but also it's been years now. And I think, I know it's very hard to say differently when you're like in a face-to-face interaction, but I really couldn't be happier to be having you and M15, the whole M15 team as supporters. I think you've been great, like a super great help and support, specifically helping, I think, originally European-based company to actually find a good, strong foothold in the US. For everyone out there, before we went fully remote, we actually had a small team in New York. So we're kind of always saying we're a New York and Berlin-based company.
Yeah.
And yeah, jumping right into the topic, I think when I watch the news about COVID-19 and see the New York situation, it really, my heart bleeds because I think spending so many months there now, definitely part New Yorker now, like sitting here in Berlin in like safety kind of almost and thinking, how can I help, what to do? How has it impacted you and your family? I know you're partly based in New York.
Yeah, I mean, I have a home in Florida. We also have obviously a headquarter office in Los Angeles. So I tended to move around a lot anyway. Really, really luckily, before everything really hit hard, I brought my family down to Florida. So we're in our home in Florida. As you can see, there's some sunshine behind me. So definitely a very, very different experience to what I would have had if we had been in New York. My heart generally it's been tough. It's difficult to kind of navigate a new working environment. I mean, this is part of the beauty of what you're trying to do in terms of supporting people and how they manage and how they run their organizations or run their teams in a totally different experience to what they're used to and accustomed to and trained to do. So, yeah, it's been interesting experience. If one of my kids walks in and jumps on my lap, I apologize now. It started off as a television meme, but now it seems to be part of everyone's life every day. So, yeah, just, keeping focus and getting the work done, staying healthy. We are being very, very careful here. And I have to say, I'm one of the very lucky few that have had the opportunity to kind of create an environment where I can still be really productive and keep my family safe.
That's really good to hear. I think, yeah, in these particular times, I think it's family, team, customers, keeping everyone close and working together towards safety, I think is the most important principle. I want to kind of be more curious about your past a bit more because I think it's super cool to see what you're doing currently with M15 and the companies you're investing in. However, I think you've got such an interesting journey. You've built one company yourself as a CEO from ground up, basically, to over 180 million too. Sorry.
One
of that size.
Meaningful size. Yeah, absolutely.
And then you joined DigitalOcean as a COO, where we met each other. And in both of these last companies, you've gone through a crisis, or a major crisis. First the dot-com bubble, then the 2008 crisis. I can't wait to hear the stories behind it. How did it impact you back then? What were your major learnings? Tell me the story about the crisis back then. I think as everyone else out there looking for solutions, ideas, and learnings.
Yeah. So, I mean, both were very different experiences. So just to kind of clarify background, as you know very well, but for everybody that's watching, I'm, an operator at heart. I've been operating businesses for 20, 25 years. Founded my first business back in 1997, which ages me, but it's the reality. And then obviously in the last year, really got into the investing side with a real vision to try and help other founders such as yourself kind of get benefit from whatever learnings I've been able to attain over the years. So my first company, if we kind of divide this up, we'll just talk about the dot-com bubble first.
Yeah.
The one consistency with all of these crises is when you're in it, you think the world is ending and nothing is ever going to be the same again. It's how we feel right now about coronavirus. I hear it all the time. But I will say from my previous experiences, the reality is everything does come back to life. It's always, it's never the most pessimistic point of view. It's rarely the most optimistic point of view, but there is always a pathway back to healthy growth and healthy, evolution within the market as a whole. Nothing has ever ended the world. Nothing has ever changed the world to such a degree that it's unrecognizable. Generally, what I've seen is, within all the crises, the only things that have happened is the world and consumer behavior is moving in a certain trajectory anyway, regardless of these crises. And what the crises sometimes do is they'll accelerate a certain aspect of that behavior. But it's not that it's changing off of its existing path. It's just that it's accelerating a certain component of that path. So if you're always thinking to the future, your future considerations generally will consistently, be true. They just may happen across a slightly different time frame than what you were perhaps expecting before. So back in 2000, I started my first company in 97, as I mentioned, and in 2000, it was a video technology company. You could, assimilate it to something like Ring these days, but the reality is back then it was dial-up modems, 4 frames a second if you were lucky, and very, very different. But we basically deployed cameras into a whole bunch of environments, a lot of daycare centers, which created portals for their parents to be able to see their kids, a lot of gas stations, gyms, manufacturing facilities, just a whole bunch of different environments that really allowed for people to kind of see their environment and understand, what they were, what's actually happening in real time through camera. I'll keep talking when you disappear.
Yes, I don't know what really happened, to be honest. I was wanting to welcome people in the stream and just wave with people, and then it goes away. So my bad. Yeah. Sorry, keep going.
Don't worry, I'll keep talking. No problem. And so we built this technology. I honestly, I was in my early 20s. I had no idea what I was doing, just kind of winging it. But that's what you do when you're an early founder. And I was learning as I go. And we were doing great. We were growing. It was the dot-com bubble. You didn't really have to create proper structured business models and revenue at that time. It was just have you got momentum? Are you moving in the right direction? Do you have a unique position? What does your team look like? And so we were checking all those boxes, and we were getting a lot of interest for investment and the like. And so we got to early 2000, and we lined up a $20 million round of investment, signed the term sheets, went into legals, did everything, and had a team at that point of maybe 60, 70 people in the organization, 30 or so engineers, maybe even more, a pretty meaty organization at that point. As you do when you have a term sheet and you're about to close, you have 2-3 months of runway left because you're getting money. And literally, we got to the day where we were signing and the wire was supposed to arrive. I remember it was Monday. And anecdotally, we had a fire alarm in our building. And so the whole company went down, crossed the street, stood in a parking lot. This was in LA at the time. And we were all just looking out the building and waiting for the fire alarm to stop so we could all go back to work. and I get a phone call on my mobile phone. Mobile phones back then looked very different to what they look like now.
Was
So I
it a
got a phone.
Nokia?
It was, I think, probably an Ericsson or something like that. But we got I got a phone call. I picked up the phone. I remember this was like maybe mid-morning or midday or something. And it was the lead investor. And the lead investor basically said, hey, bottom has fallen out of our portfolio. We're pulling back on all investments. We can't close. I'm sorry. I mean, this is the day we were going to get $20 million in our bank.
Wow.
This is all plans
with like
laid
all people
out,
around you that are
ready to kick off.
Yeah.
Ready to kick off hiring, everything you can imagine, like ready to go. And suddenly, I look up and, my face must have gone white or green. And I was like, the world's just changed on me. The world's just collapsed on me. And that was literally the morning of the first major part of the crash. So if anybody was around in that time, it was maybe a 3-month process to go from the beginnings to the ultimate crash. And so I immediately had to kind of navigate, figure out what are we going to do. We had maybe 4 or 5 investors in the round as a whole, but this lead investor was taking a big chunk of the round and was leading. And so to reconstitute the round would have been a big struggle. And I honestly don't know if we would have had enough time to do it. Yeah. And so we immediately started thinking of options. Do we reconstitute the round? Do we take the smaller round and kind of consolidate? Do we, I had like 2 or 3 companies making acquisition proposals towards us. So do I pursue those? And ultimately,
have you seen it coming? Like, was it at that point in time already like kind of creeping through the news, or like were there rumors?
This
like,
was first hit. This was first hit. Absolutely first hit. So this was, the first big impact that started the process of the crash. On the Friday, everyone was riding high. So I think back these days, I'm like, what if we had closed on Friday? How different the next, year of my life would have been, and even potentially more than a year. But ultimately what we did is we reconsolidated. I was trying to look for guidance and advice around me, but honestly I was not surrounded by great advisors at the time. I was young. I didn't really know what I was doing. It was just, getting very bad advice from different people. But ultimately, I came to the conclusion of, what's the key thing I need to do here? First of all, I need to keep the business alive. So I immediately was forced to think about cutting my burn in a very significant way overnight to give myself the breathing room.
Wait, slow down. So this is like within hours of that same day. What did you do that day? Whom did you talk to? Like, did you go and lock yourself away for an hour? What?
No, so this, we'll talk about kind of the guiding principles of how I would say anybody should react. First time I ever had to deal with this, but luckily I have generally a very calm demeanor. And so the first thing was, okay, I'm not going to freak out. I got to stay calm. Obviously brought the founders in, we talked about it right away. We said, hey, we've got to think about what we're doing. And so I think it was through that week that we just spent a lot of time just talking about options. And I was kind of going outside and figuring out guidance from wherever I could get it and just trying to culminate all these different points of data that were coming at me. And but the main thing I tried to do was really stay calm as much as possible through the process and not just do something knee-jerk that was going to ultimately fire back at me. Yep. So first thing we decided is we have to preserve the company. We've got to give ourselves some more breathing room. We're going to run out of money very quickly. Yeah. And that forced us to let go of 30-40% of our staff overnight. So literally by the end of that week, we had to go through this exercise of letting, a significant proportion of our staff go, but keeping the rest of our staff engaged. And it was, it was literally something straight out of a movie. It was like all of a sudden on a Friday, you pull, 20, 30 people into one room, the rest of the people into another room. You go into one room, spend 5 minutes telling people that, unfortunately they're going to be let go. And then you have an HR team in there, kind of process it after that and keep them, give them every piece of support you can. And then you turn and focus very quickly to the other team that you're going to keep, and you engage them and you kind of get them back on.
I was about to ask, we get a lot of requests currently from founders and managers of what used to be high growth companies that now all of a sudden from one day to another need to decide whether they let people go, how many do they cut salaries, how much impact will this have? And I think that's the challenging part, right? We don't see yet how bad things will be. We just know it's going to be worse than it was before, but like how bad it will be. What would you kind of like remembering back then, but also in general, what would be your advice on what to do with that second room? So you obviously need to go and instill hope in the rest of these people. And it's always great, like, hey, I didn't get fired, but actually you need them to pull much harder. How do you achieve that?
So you have to have a plan. I mean, even in a situation we were in where I would say the plan was, sketchy at best, you have to go in there and have a vision and have a plan and actually really be a leader and exude confidence that, hey, we've hit a bump in the road. We've had to make a very difficult decision, but we're all here together and we're ready to move on. And I think the other big thing is whatever change, whatever cut you make, you got to make it in one quick sweeping action, because the biggest risk you have to culture in general is if other people are scared that they're going to get fired the following week.
Yeah.
So you got to make the decision once, execute on that decision, and then make sure everybody else feels absolutely secure that they have a future and that they're a part of the future of the organization.
Did you tell them how much runway you had at that point? Like, did people know how long?
It's a long time ago. I don't think we were completely transparent about every aspect of it. We gave them the general themes of it, but we didn't, I don't think we sat there and said, oh, we got you guys, we've only got you guys for another 3 months. Like we just said we had to make a change. This is what happened. The market's crashed on, what we thought was going to happen has changed.
Yeah. And by the way, you guys, sorry for interrupting you. Everyone who's watching, I'm sure you have questions for Karl. So please don't shy away from just dropping them in the chat. I'm going to pick them up and we can address them as we go. So don't hesitate. Keep going.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, and I'll get through this story because I think we got to get to the 2008 story, which is very, very different. But basically, the plan was reset the company so we had the lifeline that we needed, and I think that's definitely a case now for a lot of companies to think, hey, we're not going to solve this in a month. We don't even know what's going to happen with coronavirus in the next month. So how do we extend our life and give ourselves a breathing room to actually find a solution? And so that's what we did for ourselves then. And then immediately after that, we began to weigh up what are the different options and avenues. And luckily, we had acquisition interest. And because there was still some breathing room, it wasn't completely dead market, I was able to very quickly turn a transaction. My key goals at that point were, how do I protect my investors and make sure that they're kept whole? How do I protect my employees and make sure that the business has life? We luckily got through an acquisition successfully very quickly, obviously much lower valuation than I would have ever have hoped.
Yeah.
Brought on a good CEO to come and take over. I stayed in the role for another year, just in a supporting capacity to transition. Yeah. And then a year later, that was my earn out. Essentially, a year later, I left and went and did an MBA here in New York. That's what moved me to New York. So that was kind of the general experience there. And, I think maybe if we talk about 2008, and then I can kind of give you the guiding principles I learned from two. So 2008 was a very different scenario. I was much more equipped to handle from kind of just an experience and education standpoint to handle the situation, but unfortunately it wasn't any easier of a situation. So I had a fintech company. We were doing business in China, London, and New York, and we were doing incredibly well. We launched, I started the company in like 2004, 2005. We launched in late Q4 2006, and in 2008 we were already doing north of $80 million worth of business. And so it was growing very quickly. It was a really good platform. It was kind of providing financial solutions for trade with China, all through a technical platform. And so I remember it was early September, and the whole process of the market situation was beginning to unravel. Yeah. And with Lehman and stuff, it didn't really affect us as much. So again, everyone was very shaky on the credibility of the financial markets, but we were still kind of treading waters, trying to see how this was going to impact us. And I remember it was my wife now, but my girlfriend at the time, we had our anniversary. We flew over. I was in London. That was our HQ. I flew over to Paris with her. We went to Disney, Euro Disney. It was Monday morning, and we're walking into Euro Disney, and then I start getting the phone calls. And for us, we were underwritten by AIG, and all of our banking facilities were essentially banked against AIG's underwriting.
Mm-hmm.
And so AIG was a linchpin in our ability to deliver the service we wanted to deliver. And so I got the phone call Monday that AIG was about to go bust. And obviously every one of the banks that we worked with, a whole syndicate of banks, all started calling me one after the other. And then I had to spend the rest of the morning trying to figure out how I was going to get from Paris back to London, because I think there was some other stuff going on where there's some unique cloud or dust cloud over Europe or something. I couldn't fly, had to figure out how to get a train. But basically it was like planes, trains, and automobiles trying to get back to London, get back to my desk to be able to figure this out. And so for the next month at least, my wife now always tells me that I would wake up every morning and I would be green from the first phone call of the day. And I would have to like navigate through the day just to get to the end of the day and survive the day. So AIG basically being at risk of defaulting, going under, was then putting all of our banks at risk, which meant we had we had a supply and demand business. Our supply was the source of capital. Our demand was the customer base. And so we were having a real struggle in making sure we maintained our ability to actually fund the business, fund the actual transactions we were doing. Couple of in our portfolio of customers, a couple went bust, which was actually in the long run a blessing in disguise, because AIG stepped up and executed on the insurance policy and actually delivered. So it proved that they were still standing by. And AIG ultimately wrote a letter to every one of the banks in our syndicate to tell them that they were not going anywhere and that they were standing by us. And that allowed us in the very short term to settle the waters. Very different.
How did you act differently in that, like maybe kind of like pulling it back to the personal note? So very different life situations as well.
Yeah.
How did you act differently in that Paris scenario versus the first time around?
Well, yeah, I mean, the Paris scenario, I was so inundated with trying to get back to the office and I was just fielding like panic calls from every one of our stakeholders. So for me, it was just like trying to settle people down. I didn't really have time to think
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, the very different scenario here is the demand side of our business shot through the roof, because suddenly everybody needed financial support and everybody started coming to us. So we actually ultimately ended up growing from 80 something million to 137 million in revenue the following year, and would have done north of 250 if we were able to write that business.
Execute it.
Execute the business.
Yeah.
So the demand was going through the roof.
Yeah.
And we had a good capital base as a business. So I didn't have any of the issues related to changing the financial construct or the expense construct of the company.
Yeah.
My issue was a supply issue.
Yeah.
So we actually, and so this is actually a big part of kind of the second key theme that I would push is to be strategic. A lot of people will give guidance to every founder to say, oh, just cut, go into hibernation. But that's not the case. Not every company is going to deal with negativity in these situations. There is a lot of opportunity. And it's really, really important to kind of balance the offense and defense that you play. So the defense is, how do I protect myself in this environment from supply chain issues or cash flow issues or things like that? But then the offense is, where do I actually see opportunity for potential growth or potential unique advantage? And how do I go after that and actually invest into that? So with this company, China Export Finance, we doubled down on the demand side. We doubled down on supporting customers, adding customers, building our portfolio business and growing the business. Yeah. And the big focus was just scramble on the back end to make sure that the supply stays there and that we maintain as much supply as we can. And the other unique advantage here, which is another one of the key things I would advise, is the board that we put together for this second company was so strong and so experienced that it created an incredible amount of really good advice, guidance, and influence and support which I did not have with the first company. The first company, I was just getting bad advice from everywhere.
And it's so key because, like, maybe for everyone else who's watching, to give you a little bit of context. So obviously, I mean, Karl is an investor in Bunch, so he's also on our board. So it's literally like that scenario that we went through together like 3 weeks ago. And funny enough, I was traveling in Austria when like the WHO, like World Health Organization, basically called it a pandemic. And between like I literally was a 5-day trip because it was my husband's birthday. He had like Argentine friends flying over from Argentina, meeting in Austria. They were, by the end of that trip, stranded 24 hours in the Madrid airport, like fearing for their lives, never to be able to get out of Spain. They finally made it. So like these 3 days going from like, oh yeah, I'm like on the short trip vacation, great, for getting energy for like the next goals, then to like with a mask and like everything covered, barely make it back to Berlin, like made it to Berlin, wasn't quarantined, didn't leave the house since then, basically. And then we had this call, I think, after like I got back 5 days or 3 days or so. Yeah. And I think like colored by this experience, and we also actually had more demand in that week as well. So we started pushing out more content. We started creating like first help toolkits for leaders, like how to deal with the sudden remote situation, like what to do with the team, how to structure meetings. So the team was home pressing out like content like crazy to actually satisfy the requests they were getting and taking advantage of opportunities. And on the back end, Charles, Anthony, and I, who are the co-founding team at Bunch, kind of like sitting together, fuck, what are we going to do? We need to prolong our runway. What is our cost looking like? We probably need to let go people. What is happening? Okay. Let's like breathe. And then we had this call, and I think it was mind-blowing to me how much different I was thinking after this call. And I think you opened the call with like, how are you guys doing? And so on. And then the first like paragraph you said was like, guys, we looked at you at Empathy. We think you have more opportunities in this situation. Are you seeing this? Like, do you consider this? And it like literally fell. And since then, it never left me. Like, I think seeing the situation through the right glasses is so key as a founder, because I actually started thinking about this, and I'm like, look at Slack stuff. Like, look at Zoom situation. We're providing support to leaders that lead remote team. Like, there is no way we will lose in this situation. Like, all we need to do is to like mindset and keep everything at execution. It's like spot opportunities quickly, execute quickly, and just like don't even look back. Obviously, protect on the cost side, but actually in these situations, as a founder, you have the power to really say, it's our mindset that's going to determine how this is going to go. Yeah. So like, if we keep the shit together, and I think having someone who like snaps it at you is like, chill out, relax. There's opportunity. Where's the opportunities? I think that's so key, and like it's invaluable, that support and advice. So thank you again for it.
Well, I appreciate the feedback on that. I'm glad that it works for you guys. But I think you resonate a lot of the key themes here, which is you have to stay calm first. You have to be strategic. So you have to really think about this balance between offense and defense. You can't go into hibernation as a business. Like if you go into hibernation, it's the equivalent of just, essentially shutting yourself down, and then relaunching out of hibernation is so much more difficult. So you got to always figure out like, what is the silver lining? What is the area? Even if my business is decimated, can I focus on some other aspect of what we're doing to keep the energy and keep the momentum of what I'm building? Fiscal responsibility is absolutely key. So you have to think defensively about how can you give yourself more lifeline. But then finally, what I was saying before is make sure you got the right people around you. It's the conversation you and I had. It's the board meeting I had back in 2008 that, gave me access to so many different avenues of influence that I didn't think I had. It's those putting that positive mindset around you. And the opposite to that is when you have people around you that are just giving you bad advice and just pushing you to be overly defensive or even to be overly offensive. It's like you've got to make sure that you really surround yourself now or even, before any crisis with the right people you really trust that are going to give you the right guidance. And that's a big part of kind of the ingredients from which you're going to work to build the ultimate solution. So those are kind of like the 5 core themes of what I think about as we go into an environment like this. And inevitably, a good creative, like every founder out there, you're a founder because you're creative, you're smart, you're able to strategize and figure out ways to get things done that other people haven't thought about. Like use those skills to navigate what the world looks like for you during and post this kind of a crisis.
Thank you. I think this is very wise words, and it is indeed, I think, the responsibility of every founder, but every leader, frankly. It's not even a founder responsibility only to keep that in mind and to kind of say, like, if not me, who is it then? Like, who, like, if we don't actually try to see how we're going to get through the crisis and what's the opportunity afterwards, and how we can build a bridge towards that. Like nobody's going to do that for us. Like we need to build this. So I think that the activity and the optimism, and I think Simon Sinek has differentiated that like a week ago. He basically said like there is a difference between positivity and optimism. Positivity is literally just say like, I don't see negative cues. Like, of course I see that almost every airline is out of business. Obviously, I see my parents' restaurant is closed and probably going to be closed for another 3 months. Like, and a lot of other people are losing their jobs. So, like, I see that. But optimism basically means to see like what could be a positive picture afterwards. So, accepting the negative reality and then building towards the optimistic picture. And I think this is super, super important for anyone navigating the crisis.
And also, you have to understand that to some degree, you create reality out of your perceptions. If you have a purely negative perception, or pessimistic rather perception, then you're going to move towards that pessimistic outcome.
Exactly.
If you can think optimistically, strategically, think about what could happen, how you could, evolve in this environment, you're going to organically move in that direction. And so I think it's really, really important that you always maintain some level of optimism that allows you to see opportunities that you may have not, noticed or spotted before if you were just looking at this as a doom and gloom scenario.
Yeah. I have one more question, or actually two, and then we can wrap it up. Everyone, I know these things are typically 30 minutes, but I can't let this go. Like I need to ask this question. So hopefully you still enjoy the couple of extra minutes. You're a partner at the VC firm, Empathy, an amazing VC firm. Everyone out there, by the way, if you're a founder, please consider them, send your pitch decks and so on. And I've been talking through a couple of VC partners that we have because we're also partnering with investors more and more right now to reach their founders, to provide support with the tech and the products we're building. I think it's super interesting to see how VCs actually are going to, like as a sector, as an industry, segment is going to react to the current situation. So, of course, the question first, like, how did this impact your day-to-day activities? Do you look at the same amount of deal flow? Do you write checks on Zoom? How is the reality of an investor now that you can't meet founders face to face?
Yeah, no, that's a very, very fair question. I think there's two questions in there. One question is the remote aspect of a process, and the other question is just the general market appetite for investment. Yeah. So in terms of general market appetite for investment, we're open for business. We're looking at opportunities. I think that a scenario like this shines a light on good managers and shines a light on resilient businesses. And so I think there's probably a layer of diligence on top of what may have existed before. So it's going to be a little harder to get over the hump, but it doesn't mean that investments don't happen. So we're still bullish and still looking for great, outstanding businesses and founding teams to invest in. So that's consistent. I think there's probably going to be valuation considerations and things that are just natural based upon the change in public market multiples. But those are all just par for the course when you go through a scenario like this. In terms of the tougher part is
the remote.
The remote. You and I built a relationship over, almost 2 years before we actually invested in you. We like to feel as though we have a very close dynamic relationship with our founders, and we like to, and founding teams, and we like to be very actively hands-on involved and partnered. And we haven't yet made a decision fully remotely. So any of the decisions we've made, we've at some point or another spent time and been face-to-face with the founders to date. And we don't currently yet understand exactly how that's going to play out.
I've heard an interesting solution in one of my calls that I had 2-3 days ago with a VC based out of New York. And they had a similar situation where they actually met the team remotely and they really wanted to make the deal, but they felt like insecure about doing it because they've just simply never done it before. And so apparently the investment partner then has like met the founder and went into like a social distancing hike. So keeping distance is still kind of like being in the same space. Yeah. No joke, a real story. Are you considering any creative solutions to this?
I think those things are great. I think the bigger issue really is just the geographic limitations.
Yeah.
Like going on, if we have a potential investment in LA and one of our LA partners wants to go and meet the person on a hike or do something, active with them, 100% we'll do that. We'll take the opportunity. It's, when we see great founders out of Boulder or Austin or other parts of the country that it just makes it difficult because we just can't necessarily geographically navigate that. Yeah. So, but I think those opportunities that's a great creative approach. I totally applaud that. I would, absolutely promote that myself. Obviously, always take into consideration the guidelines and the rules that are being set by
officials
local government and officials. Yeah. But yeah, however we can do that. And I think honestly, this is a very different world today to what it was 10 years ago. Remote connectivity is a lot stronger. Like this conversation is almost as good as you and I being in the same room. So I have some level of confidence that we will be able to still build relationships in this way. But it's just something, that you've got to, no one ever believed in online dating until online dating happened.
Yeah.
Right? So you just got to believe in the ability to actually establish somewhat of a relationship in this environment.
And this is my last question. I'm happy, super happy that you kind of already opened the door for that. What are your takes on the future? So how do you think how do you think the world will change with this crisis? From work to how we do business, what are your projections?
So as I said, I don't think you get 180 degree or even 90 degree changes in trajectory. I think you just get accelerations. So there's some things, first of all, human nature, just my experience the last two crises, when you go out a year or two, a lot of people will actually unfortunately not take any learnings from this situation. And, this happened in, every crisis in history. You're wounded for a short period of time and then suddenly you start forgetting and then the next generation forgets. And before you know it, you're doing all the same things wrong
over again
before. And that's the reason why there's another crash, 10 years later. So it's a cycle. It's human nature. Having said that, I think that the concept of remote working will be accelerated. I think the concept of digital engagement, e-commerce and communications and things of that nature, telehealth, like anything that's driving digital engagement will be accelerated. All these things are already kind of the trajectory of human behavior. It's just a question of how fast people adopt them. And so in this period of time, you're going to see a huge amount of adoption that would traditionally have taken another 2 to 5 years to reach. And so that accelerated adoption just means people are going to move into those, types of behavior more efficiently. And so I think as you start thinking about, do I think people are going to go to the movies? Yes, that's going to come back. Do I think people are going to have meetups or go to bars or go to restaurants? Absolutely. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but that's all going to come back. And I don't think 2 years from now, you're going to have a completely different, world order as a result of this. I just think that, people have to slowly roll back into a lot of those standard activities. But
I think there's a lot of opportunities too. I mean, like being based in a country that is very, one of our investors once asked us, like, how do you do this? How do you make this innovative solution that you're building happen in a laggard country? So I sometimes think about this and seeing Germany going from like never considering digital media and education and people fighting for it like years over years. And from one day to another, oops, we figured it out. Okay, no problem at all. Great. So there was this joke, I think, on LinkedIn that I saw today, like, who drove your digital transformation, which was literally the number one topic for like all enterprises in Europe for the past 7 years. And then it said like CEO, CTO, or COVID-19. I think that describes the picture really well. Like if you have to adopt, you just adopt, and then you can't go back probably, but not into the same phase exactly. So the world definitely, I think, is a change, but I don't know whether it's only for the worse, to be honest. I see a lot of good change happening that we struggled with.
Yeah, I don't. That's my point. Is it's not for the worse. It's consistent with what's already happening.
Yeah.
It's just an acceleration, which actually, if anything, says you're pushing humanity along that path of evolution faster. So it's never for the worse in the long run. It's just a natural part of the evolution of society. I mean, I came from DigitalOcean, and they're seeing a very significant boost in digital activity, and that's a reflection of a changing market environment that is moving more and more into digital.
Yeah. Super cool. Thank you so much, Karl, for sharing your personal story, but also sharing insights. I hope you guys got a lot out of it. I certainly did. I'm, again, feeling very honored, humbled, and very lucky and happy to have you on our board. Looking forward to many more good discussions in the future. And thanks again for being here today. Thanks again for being here for founders and spending time with us. And yeah, I hope you stay healthy, safe. All the best.
Thank you. You too. And all of your sentiment is shared on our side. We feel honored to be part of your business, and honored to have such a great team, and yourself such a great leader, kind of driving the vision of what Bunch is. So thank you so much, and we'll look forward to doing this again sometime.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Bye, Karl.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.